The war between Russia and Ukraine, which began in February 2022, has shocked the world. The war, which began in February 2022, has had profound consequences not just for the countries involved, but for the global community. Now, nearly 2 years later, as battles rage on, the question is, how is this war mostly going to settle? At the heart of this war is a complex struggle involving territorial control, national sovereignty, and international power dynamics. Ukraine, with strong Western support, has been able to fend off Russia's initial advances, recapturing significant territory. Meanwhile, Russia remains entrenched in key areas, especially in the east and south, despite facing mounting sanctions and growing international isolation. Many thought this conflict would be over quickly, but the reality has proven far more complex. The war has shifted over time, and while the outcome remains uncertain, there are key factors shaping how it might eventually settle. First, let's look at the military situation. Despite the initial Russian advances, the Ukrainian military has shown remarkable resilience, gaining momentum with Western support. Over the past year, Ukraine has launched successful counteroffensives in the east and south, retaking significant territory. Russia, too, has adapted. Its forces have entrenched themselves, especially in key areas like the Donbass region, where Russian-backed separatists have held sway since 2014. However, the longer the war drags on, the more both sides face strain. Ukraine relies heavily on Western military aid and supplies, while Russia faces significant international sanctions and the challenge of maintaining a military force stretched thin across multiple fronts. Another key factor is international involvement. Western countries, led by the United States, have provided billions of dollars in military aid to Ukraine, from advanced weaponry to training. NATO, too, continues to stand by Ukraine, while Russia faces growing isolation on the global stage. The West's support for Ukraine remains strong, though there are growing concerns over how long this support can last, especially if there is political shift in Western countries. On the other hand, Russia has turned to China and other countries for diplomatic and economic support, but these ties are not as deep as Russia might hope. Internationally, the war has caused economic shockwaves, disrupting global food supplies and increasing energy costs. Western countries, led by the US, have provided military and financial aid to Ukraine, while Russia has sought support from nations like China. But the longer the war drags on, the more uncertain the situation becomes. The war has taken an immense economic toll. Russia faces crippling sanctions, with industries struggling under the weight of restrictions. Meanwhile, Ukraine's economy has been devastated, with key industries destroyed and cities in ruins. Rebuilding will take decades, and that's if peace is achieved soon. Countries around the world are also feeling the impact. Global food prices have risen due to disruptions in Ukrainian grain exports. The economic fallout from this conflict is vast, and it's only likely to grow as the war continues. As the war progresses, both sides have at times hinted at the possibility of negotiations. But peace talks have stalled several times, often over demands for territorial control, particularly in areas like Crimea, the Donbass, and the southern regions. The Ukrainian position has remained firm. It will not accept Russian territorial gains, especially in Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. Meanwhile, Russia has consistently demanded that Ukraine demilitarize and recognize its territorial claims. However, there are signs that both sides may come to a point where they realize that continuing the war is unsustainable. Pressure from the international community, economic hardships, and military fatigue could eventually push both Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. So, how is this war most likely to settle? There are several possible outcomes, but none that are certain. Let's explore a few scenarios. First, a negotiated peace agreement. This might involve a ceasefire, a demilitarized zone, and international peacekeepers overseeing key areas. However, for this to work, both sides would have to make significant compromises. Ukraine might have to accept some form of territorial loss, while Russia could face internal political pressure to pull back. Second, a frozen conflict. This is where fighting could stall in certain regions, with no clear victor but no definitive peace either. This scenario could leave Russia in control of parts of Ukraine, but with constant tensions along the front lines. Finally, a long-term insurgency or guerrilla warfare. Even if a peace agreement is reached, parts of Ukraine might continue to resist Russian influence, creating a prolonged and unstable situation. No matter the outcome, the human cost of this war is unimaginable. Thousands of lives have been lost, millions have been displaced, and entire communities have been destroyed. As both sides look for a way to end this war, the scars of this conflict will remain for generations. The question is not just about how the war will end, but how Ukraine and Russia will rebuild after nearly 2 years of devastating conflict. In the end, the Russia-Ukraine war will be shaped by a complex web of military, economic, and diplomatic factors. While it's impossible to predict the future with certainty, one thing is clear: the road to peace will be long, and the world will continue to watch closely as this war unfolds. Possible outcomes include a negotiated peace, where both sides agree to a ceasefire, or a frozen conflict, where military action stagnates, leaving contested areas under tension. There's also the risk of a continued insurgency in Ukrainian regions under Russian control, prolonging instability. Whatever the outcome, the road to peace remains fraught with challenges. Only time will tell how this conflict, and its devastating human toll, will ultimately be resolved. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay curious, and let's hope for a peaceful resolution soon.